I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos.
Hello there, Price of Reason here with a series review. While it may not seem like it today, Star Wars for many years was once considered the biggest entertainment franchise in the world, but in 2013 it was purchased by Disney from George Lucas, and since then, under the leadership of Kathleen Kennedy, this IP has been run into the ground. After turning Star Wars into a series of cinematic diminishing returns, since 2020, Star Wars has only appeared on Disney+, Disney's troubled streaming service that has been losing them billions of dollars every year since it was launched. While initially Disney Plus's The Mandalorian was relatively well received by some longtime fans, by the time we got to Mandalorian Season 3, The Book of Boba Fett, and Kenobi, it became clear that this franchise will probably never recover from the damage of the Disney Star Wars sequel trilogy. And amidst all of Lucasfilm's recent failures, this week the first 2 episodes of the new Star Wars series Ahsoka have been released on Disney+. Now for those of you who don't know, Ahsoka is a live-action series that acts as a sequel to Dave Filoni's animated Star Wars show Rebels, and he's the writer and showrunner here too. Dave Filoni, in case you're not aware, is a guy who was once considered a sort of protege to George Lucas, but in recent years has become more of a Lucasfilm company man. Anyhow, it seems that Disney were hoping that Ahsoka would manage to drum up some interest in the Star Wars franchise again after so many stinkers, but the real question is this Ahsoka show any good? And my answer to that is, for the most part, no, it isn't. In this video, I will discuss the general plot, what I didn't like about the show, what I did like about the show, and then give it an official score. Episode 1 starts off with 2 Sith-like characters boarding a ship, a man and a girl, killing everybody on board, releasing prisoner Morgan Elsbeth, a witch character that we've already encountered in Mandalorian Season 2. Now, some people may say that those 2 Sith-like characters were actually something called Grey Jedis, but for me, they look like they're supposed to be Sith, so that's what I'll call them. Meanwhile, Ahsoka Tano is at an underground temple of sorts, walking around and caressing some poles, and after she, rubs those poles extensively, she ends up with a MacGuffin spear in her hand, which is apparently also a map to finding Dave Filoni's version of Thrawn. Now, for those of you who don't remember, this version of Thrawn was last seen on board a ship with Ezra Bridger and Rebels as they both disappeared or something. Anyhow, Ahsoka tells Hera Syndulla, also from Rebels, that she has the map, and then they both speculate if this could perhaps help them find not only Thrawn, but also Ezra Bridger. Now, because this fear is locked, Ahsoka doesn't know how to read the map, and apparently there's only one person in the entire galaxy that can read the map: Sabine Wren. Now, for those of you who don't know, Sabine Wren is yet another character from Rebels, and now she's presented as a typical 2023 Disney arrogant young woman archetype. She's supposed to speak at an event because she's a big hero, but instead she wants to ride her bike and listen to punk rock music. Yes, that's right. Punk rock music appears in Star Wars for some reason, although to be honest, the punk song that we hear sounds more like Yoko Ono punk rather than Ramones punk. But I digress. Anyways, the governor of Lothal sends his people to find Sabine Wren, but she's too darn smart, and she's too darn fast for them, so they can't catch her, because she's the best. Sabine then goes back to her apartment and watches the last message Ezra Bridger left her before he disappeared in Rebels, telling her to continue the good fight in his absence or something. Meanwhile, Morgan is now bossing around the Sith guy and his apprentice girl. She wants them to go to Lothal to find Sabine Wren because of her ties to Ahsoka. How does Morgan know about Ahsoka's ties to Sabine Wren? Yeah, don't think about it. Ahsoka and Sabine reunite, but they're apparently not on good terms because at some point, Sabine was a Jedi apprentice to Ahsoka, but then they had a falling out. How is Ahsoka considered a Jedi if she never completed her training? And how is Sabine a Jedi apprentice if she's a Mandalorian? Yeah, don't think about that either. Anyhow, Ahsoka asks Sabine to decipher the secret map, but Sabine wants to take the map to her apartment and work on it alone. Ahsoka then tells Sabine that the spear may hold the fate of the entire galaxy, so she can't just leave with it. So when Ahsoka turns around, Sabine leaves with it. But then of course it turns out that Sabine has been tracked by the Sith girl character, who ends up stabbing her in the stomach, defeating her, and taking the map away from her. Episode 2 starts with Sabine recovering from her defeat. How is she still alive when Qui-Gon Jinn couldn't survive such an injury? Well, much like Reva and Kenobi, women can't get killed by lightsabers in Disney Star Wars anymore because they're just too darn strong. Sabine then tells Ahsoka that she was able to open the MacGuffin map, but that the Sith girl took it away from her before she could decipher it. Ahsoka then goes to Sabine's apartment and then takes out a robot droid that conveniently remained there for some reason. Sabine then conveniently uses the droid memory to find out that the bad guys are located on Corellia. So Ahsoka and Hera decide to meet there. Meanwhile, the Sith people and Boss Lady Morgan play with their map as she talks about its immense power. At the same time, Hu Yang the robot tells Sabine that she should go back to being a Jedi apprentice because she's the best. At Corellia, Ahsoka and Hera are getting strange vibes from the guy in charge there. Of course, it turns out that he and his crew are still loyal to the Empire. Then, the Sith girl, a droid, and an Inquisitor-type character arrive there too. They seem to get away from Ahsoka, but Hera, with the help of Chopper the robot, manages to stick a tracking device to their transporter, so they will be able to catch up with them later. Sabine then decides to cut her hair short, and now she looks like a little boy. She then tells Ahsoka that she's ready to become a Jedi apprentice once again, and so they're off. In the final scene, Sith guy tells Boss Lady Morgan that Ahsoka is coming for her, and then the show ends. Now that we've gone over the plot, I'll tell you what I didn't like about Ahsoka. Number 1, the pacing. This show is slow as fuck, and for no good reason aside from Disney wanting to stretch the runtime of each episode. In fact, these 2 episodes could have easily been condensed into 1 episode. So many pauses, breaks, and characters walking around aimlessly. Perhaps some people will be fooled by this shameless tactic, but not me. Number 2, storytelling. Much like J.J. Abrams' Rise of Skywalker, this show relies too much on mystery boxes and MacGuffins. They find a ball that has a secret map, but that secret map has to be deciphered, and there are too many plot conveniences. But worst of all, the bottom line result just seems rather boring, which is never a good thing. Also, the show's story seems to heavily rely on the animated series Rebels, which many people haven't even seen. Now, I have seen it, but since it ended 5 years ago, I myself couldn't immediately recall every single detail about it. I think this show would have been better as a more standalone concept. Number 3, cast issues. Some of the actors on this show are well cast. Rosario Dawson is good as Ahsoka, although I think she's completely wasted on this show. They keep having her walking around slowly and making serious faces, but I feel like they could have allowed her to have a bit more on-screen charm, something that Rosario Dawson usually has naturally. The late Ray Stevenson is probably the best actor we see on screen in this show, but he isn't given much to do here, as most of the time this character just stands around and takes orders from Boss Lady Morgan. Diana Lee Inosanto, the Morgan actress herself, seems to overact in every scene she's in, so that doesn't really help either. Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who plays Hera Syndulla, is awfully miscast here. I don't know why Hollywood keeps trying to make this actress a thing. Aside from having a cool name, Winstead, in my opinion, brings absolutely nothing to the table. In Rebels, the Hera character had this pleasant, soothing voice, a more likable personality, and she looked pretty cool too. On this show, Winstead's acting is rather stale. The character comes off as more annoying here than cool, and visually, she looks like a cheap cosplayer who bought her costume at Party City. Natasha Liu Bordizzo, the Sabine actress, is halfway decent, but the character itself comes off as insufferably unlikable overall, so that's kind of a wash. Perhaps the biggest casting mistake here is what they've done with David Tennant, who voices Hu Yang, Ahsoka's droid. The well-respected Scottish actor, who's best known for his stint as the 10th Doctor on Doctor Who, is horribly misused here. For starters, if you already have an actor of his caliber on your payroll, why not have him appear on screen? Also, the guy has so much natural personality and charm, but he voices the robot in the most dry and boring way, which is, I assume, what he was asked to do. But if that's what you're gonna do with the guy, why even hire him to begin with? It's a complete waste of talent, and this, in my opinion, was a major misstep. Number 4, no men. While I won't say that the show itself until now has had heavy-handed messaging, it is very much a Disney Star Wars production that stays true to Kathleen Kennedy's preferred agendas. This show is very much female-centric and female-driven. Now, to be clear, I'm totally cool with having female characters on a show, but as usual with Disney Star Wars, there simply isn't any kind of real male presence to balance things out here. And when you do see a man on screen, he's either incompetent or evil, and even the evil male has to be bossed around around by a woman. It's funny how for years when I said that Kennedy had an anti-male agenda, people acted as if I was crazy, but the proof is in the pudding. Since Kennedy took charge of Star Wars, every male character has to be diminished, humiliated, and/or put in his place. And in contrast, the women are always both sympathetic and strong. And in Ahsoka, it once again really spoils the atmosphere of the show, to an extent that in my opinion, it's a major deal breaker. The vacuum of any masculinity in this show reminded me a bit of Wakanda Forever, and no, that is not a compliment. Number 5, the visuals. There are some parts where we see ships and the visuals look okay, but there's something that at times feels a bit cheap about this production. I realize that these Disney Plus shows heavily rely on technology known as the volume, which is kind of like green screen on steroids, and sometimes that technology is fine, but I suspect that this technology may be used too often here, making the show feel like a video game at times. If I had to say anything good about this show, it would be that, number 1, it's not the worst. While Ahsoka is certainly nothing to write home about, it can take consolation in being not as bad as Book of Boba Fett, not as bad as Mandalorian Season 3, and not as bad as Kenobi. Now, to be fair, this is a very low bar to clear, but I guess credit where credit is due. The show is pretty bad, but I suppose it could have been even worse. Number 2, Chopper. I don't dislike the Chopper robot character and didn't mind seeing him on screen for the few minutes that he appears. Number 3, Lothcat. I honestly wasn't expecting to like the on-screen version of the Lothcat, but surprisingly I did. Maybe it's because I like cats in general, but I feel like the Lothcat we see looks pretty good. Number 4, the music. While the scoring here by Kevin Kiner is nowhere near as good as John Williams' scoring, at least Kiner tries to do something similar to John Williams' style, so I suppose it's passable enough. Obviously though, on Ahsoka, the bad significantly outweighs the good here, and if Lucasfilm were looking to win any former Star Wars fans back, I don't foresee this show being a huge win for them. Perhaps if we didn't keep seeing the same agenda in all of Disney Star Wars to date, this show wouldn't seem as annoying as it is, but at the end of the day, this show is simply too little too late. A show like this maybe could have succeeded 5 years ago, but with so little fan goodwill left, I think that this will ultimately be considered another flop for Disney. If I had to give the show a score based on the first 2 episodes, and 60 out of 100 is a passing grade, I would give this show a 55 out of 100, which means that it's a fail. It has isolated things in it that I like, but considering the IP and the budget they had, this show just isn't good enough. What did you think of Ahsoka? Did you love it? Feel free to let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel, and also clicking on that wonderful notification bell. Thanks for watching, my friends. Thank you, and good day.
I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos. Brum.